Thank you for joining us. This is Paul Wilson.
And Chris Emke.
And you're watching or listening to Diesel Performance Podcast. Chris, why don't you tell our audience what we're doing today?
So we're doing a ride-along in a 2017 Ford F-250. It has a 6.7 power stroke. I figured let's start with a little history, right? History is always fun. So a lot of you guys, listeners, know us and our company as Duramax Tuner. Calibrated Power is kind of like the incorporation name altogether. But our start was in Duramaxes, right? Duramaxes and then Cummins, and then a few years ago we started getting into the 6.7 Ford platform. And Paul, we've gotten a lot of kickback in the past, like, oh, Duramax Tuner and you're tuning Fords.
Yeah.
Right, if you're a Ford loyalist, a Blue Oval fan, and you're diehard Ford, you might look at some of the other brands and be like, oh, you know, Ford's better, Ford's this, Ford's that. But ironically, the Ford 6.7 platform is very similar to an LML.
It really is, yeah. So the architecture, the fuel system, the turbocharging system, the way it responds to tuning, the tuning architecture itself, all these things are very, very similar between the two.
Bosch ECM, the same. Piezo injector, CP4 Bosch injector pump, the same.
Yep.
Same similar Garrett turbocharger.
Yeah, same frame. Yep.
You know, how they insert and adapt to the motor is slightly different, but the actual basis of those said components are the same.
Yeah.
So when Nick started playing around with this ECM, he's like, oh, I've been here, done this. You know, we've played. And it's been a really nice platform for us to be able to easily adopt to and really have a strong runner. We've been offering tunes for several years on these.
Yeah.
And now we're playing around with some turbochargers and stuff like that as well, which is super cool.
Well, you know, one of the fun things I think about Diesel Performance Podcast, specifically for me, Chris, is that we get this very unique, very awesome opportunity to get out and get into some really cool trucks and drive a huge array of different vehicles. Yep. I mean, we've driven the Hummer and the Apache and Brett Keel's LB7, the Shorty. We've had a lot of fun, but this is one of those trucks that I think was a sleeper on our radar, just because it's a regular cab. It's on a small lift now. It's a like 2-inch lift or something. It's essentially leveled, in my opinion. 35-inch tires, but there's nothing wildly that jumps out about it, right? It's not an 800 horsepower vehicle. It's not a custom swap. This is something that you would expect to see on a farm or somebody to drive every single day.
Plus, it's not in at the shop and what our listeners are more acclimated with. You know, we talk heavily on Duramaxes. We've had Cummins in the past that we've done drive-alongs with and had on the podcast, and we've always been really light on the Ford content. You know, if you're going to compare all three, so it was a huge opportunity for us to say, hey, you know what, we have a really cool platform at the shop. Let's get the keys from Nick. Let's take it out. Let's drive it, and you know, let's kind of agree or disagree with all the Ford loyalists out there on like, hey, this is a great truck, or hey, it's not, and then compare it to some of the other vehicles. You know, us at the shop, you know, we love to tinker with everything. We like to explore. We want to be able to improve on. And as for myself, as I'm not really that Ford oriented, right? I've always been more of the Ram side, and you've always been more on the Duramax. Being that we have our own positions and our own outlooks, the Ford's a really solid truck. This is a really coal truck to drive.
Well, it is. And Chris, I think we've both been pretty vocal that the previous generations of Ford, not really either one of our tastes. I drove a 7.3 for a hot minute. I get it. I get the love for them. But as far as a performance application, really not going to be your best bet.
No.
But then there are guys out there who build 6 liters like monsters. There are guys out there who build the 6.4s like monsters. It can be done, absolutely. And that's been proven to us, I think, over time. Yep. However, the 6.7 is a platform that I think you and I both have been pretty vocal that we do really enjoy. Yeah. This is one of those trucks that you're going to jump in it, and if you love diesel, you're going to love this. Yeah. Chris, I think one of the things that I love about driving this truck is that I know it's a regular cab, so it's already a little lighter, but the throttle feels intuitive. Now, this does have custom EZ-Link tuning on it from Nick or, you know, team at Calibrated Power. So it's definitely not just the factory cal. Did you drive this when it was completely stock before they put a tune on it?
You know, I've driven some of the Fords, right? Okay. Stock Fords. And as much as it pains me to say this, you know, again, not much of a Ford guy, the Ford, in my opinion, is like the most complete truck. got the nicest shifting trans. The calibration factory, they drive nice. They're fairly responsive.
Yeah.
But guys have the same complaint, whether it's a Ford, GM, Ram, I want better throttle response. They missed their old box programmer on their older truck where you touch the throttle and it breaks the tires loose, right? Everyone wants it to go quicker. They want it to go and move when they apply the throttle. But these trucks, just like I said, the refinement of them, the transmissions in these things, they shift very nicely. They're very firm in their shift. They're smooth.
Yeah.
And they're super robust. Like, hands down, this is probably one of the best transmissions in the light truck duty game right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. And for somebody who loves the way an Allison feels and hates the way pretty much every Dodge Trans has ever been under a truck, the Ford still, like this specific model just really stands out, where it again, this has the tuning on it, so it's already been dialed in to kind of run with that extra torque that's produced by the engine tuning. But it does. It shifts when you want it to shift. It lugs when you want it to lug. It feels effortless, which is what I want from a transmission, right? I want a transmission that I'm not thinking about. It's doing what it's supposed to do automatically. That's the whole idea behind it. And a lot of that stems from the amount of electronic control and the design in the actual application of clutch on, clutch off, and things like that, as opposed to older versions of transmissions that just weren't as technologically advanced. Right?
What I like about these trucks is their power band. Okay, you can get into one of these trucks, you can have the engine's RPM at 1400 and come up, and it will lug, and it has the power, it has the turbo input to really pull through confidently.
Yeah.
Which is ideal when you're talking about fuel economy, when you're talking about just daily driving, and more importantly, when you're talking about towing. You want the engine to have a really nice wide operating range that has a nice efficient torque curve. So, getting in something like this, you can get in it confidently.
Yeah.
Right? And you can hook up to a trailer. It's good to go. You can hook up to a daily driver, just driving down the street, going commuting to work, what have you. And, it's not laborsome to drive by any means.
Well, and I think one of the things that we may have just kind of assumed everybody knew, but this is all emissions equipped.
Right.
This has all of the factory EGR, DEF, DPF. We're going through a regen literally as we record this.
Oh man, these trucks drive like crap with a regen.
It started off at 100% soot load. We got into it. We were driving it for a minute before we started the podcast here, and we ran it up to exactly 100% DPF load. And I've been driving it, I don't know, for the short amount of time we've been rolling here. We're already down to 71%. It's burning right through it. We're out on some back roads right now, so I'm able to kind of get a little bit of a gauge of some stop and go. I wanted to not really be jammed up in traffic, especially for a regen, when we know it's coming. We want to be smart about our emissions equipment, but we also want to kind of see, like you said, Chris, does it really drive like crap? Do you feel like you have no power? Tell you what, I'm watching the mirrors right now. I don't see any white smoke. I'm watching our temperatures. I don't see any crazy temperatures that are out of control. VGT activity isn't out of control. This truck does have a lambda gauge or an air-fuel ratio gauge on it. Hey, it's in regen. We know we're going to get a little bit more fuel. Not too worried about that during regen. It's one of those where again, it's just doing what it's supposed to do.
Super responsive on a 35. I just want to keep at it. Ford engineers did this thing right. The way they have the gearing set up and the ratios in the transmission, and how that complements the slightly bigger tire, mixed with just the overall feel of the truck, the solid front axle, the robustness of the trans, just the overall package of this vehicle. It's very, it offers a lot of those creature comforts. It's real smooth.
Well, here it is too. And with the stock exhaust, it's really quiet. Now this truck, also we had Nick on last week to talk about turbo R&D. This truck has an R&D turbo on it, I believe.
Yep. So it's one of our prototype 64 Stealths. There'll be more info to come. Us at the company, we finally went live with our Cummins turbocharger, which we've talked about in previous podcasts, our L5P turbo. So this is one of those next in the pipeline. When we had Nick on and hey, how do you decide what's the next R&D piece? What do you do? Well, here you have it. This is one of the next projects that we're working on, and here we are. We're part of the R&D process.
That's
Paul.
it. Yeah, officially a part of the R&D process.
Think we can get badges?
For sure.
I think we can get
for
badges.
sure. R&D team.
There you go.
Well, what's funny, Chris, is if nobody told you there was an aftermarket turbo on here,
you wouldn't know.
You would have no idea. Honestly, that's I remember back when we first did like an LB7 Stealth, and we used to say that like, oh, under like a stock tune or like a real mild tune, if you're driving light, you would never know the turbo was there. And as we got into 67s, which are capable mostly of like 750 to 800 horsepower in those turbos, it's always fun to get back to drive a 64, where I've been real light on the throttle, guys. We're trying to work through this regen. Like I said, I don't think I've broke 40% throttle input. We're down to 63% DPF load already, by the way.
Well, let's look at it from a different perspective, right? Because I get guys, they'll call in and they'll go, well, what does the turbo sound like, right? What is the turbo going to do? You could put a turbo on a truck, and that turbo is going to have a lot of different attributes. It can react differently based on how you use the truck.
Sure.
You could tune the truck and have it sound loud and obnoxious. You can have the turbocharger have a crazy whistle out the tailpipe. You could tune the turbo to have erratic drivability if you wanted. But what makes a great product is something that you can drop into the truck and you can retain a lot of the refined drivabilities. Well, something that you don't have to drive around that turbocharger.
There you go.
You can get in the truck, you can hook up to your trailer, you can get in the truck, you can commute, and it offers that same type of drivability or stability to where you don't have to drive around the modifications. The modifications work in favor of how you use the truck.
Exactly. And this thing too is, it's just, you need so little to tame this truck, you know, because it is. We've had now the dyno. This truck will make 600 horsepower to the wheels, no problem. But yet you get it out on the road, and it doesn't feel like a wild beast. It doesn't feel like you're dangerous. It doesn't feel like you don't know what it's going to do next. You're kind of just like, man, I barely need to touch the throttle and just rest my foot there, and it holds 60, 65 miles an hour all day long, no problem.
It's that, you know, flying under the radar, right? It's sleeper, it's subtle. If you need the power, it's there, you know? So you have a truck that's going to have good drivability. Yeah. You're going to have a truck that you can hook up to any trailer you want, you know, within the restraints of the truck, right? With what its limits are.
Sure.
And you're going to have confidence.
Well, you know, Chris, and that brings up a good question people always hit me with. It's like, well, if I increase the power of the truck, do I increase my GVW? Right. And I like the concept. I like where your head is at when you're asking that question. I really, really do.
I wish it was that simple.
However, I'm pretty sure GVW is mostly determined by safety restrictions, not power restrictions. Yep. So it's about braking. It's about can you stop the weight of the load that you have going. That has a lot to do with it. Yep. And then, of course, also, like, is the truck strong enough to survive a crash if you have all of that weight behind it and things of that nature? So it's usually not a power. I would say for those of us who have loaded a trailer well beyond what IDOT wanted us to, or whatever your state's Department of Transportation Enforcement code is there, when you add power, the thing you got to worry about is actually, are you adding heat? And that's one of the things with this turbo that I've noticed, is that even in the testing and what I've seen in the R&D process with it, is it's not a situation where we're adding a ton of power because we're adding a ton of heat, which can be a byproduct. This variable vane technology allows more airflow across a wider operating range, and that's why we get some of these results, I think, that Chris and I have been talking about, which is about how smooth it is and about how the power comes on so nicely, and about how it has this wide operating range where it's capable of doing all these things. You could hook this to a trailer. We shot some video with it, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago. Oh, cool. And we had somebody else out driving it and shooting some footage of it pulling a big enclosed 20-something foot enclosed trailer, and it did great, man. I mean, we were doing some passing shots with it, so we were working it pretty hard, and it held up just fine. You know, it's a regular cab. It's a little bouncy, right? It wasn't the best weight distribution,
right. Well, it's
for
light,
that big of a bumper pull. Yeah,
but it's unique. You know, as you get a little older doing this, you know, I think about my 19-year-old self, and I think about what I wanted in a turbocharger versus my 25-year-old self versus my 30-year self. You know, you kind of have these different requirements on checklists, you know. Sure. The one thing that's still the common attribute is I want power. You know, you want that power. You want to have more than what the stock truck is. You don't want to pull up to a truck like yours and it's the same truck, right? You want to pack a meaner punch. But as you get a little older, you want the truck to still respond and react the way that truck next to you reacted. Yeah. Just better. Yeah. Just better. So, I mean, I can't speak enough on the Ford platform, you know, and how nice this truck drives. the smoothness, the quality of the truck as a whole is definitely enjoyable.
Yeah, and I got a chance to do that towing series with Nick over on the Duramax Tuner YouTube channel where we compared all the new trucks. It was the 2019, 2020s. And the thing about that test is we drove all of the nicest possible trim levels. Like it was the Tremor package, the Denali, the whatever, Laramie or whatever the Ram was. This truck that we're driving now is not the super...
Dude, it's XLT, baby.
XLT, so that's... Where am I at in the Ford echelon of accessories?
We have all the bells and whistles, but we have cloth. Okay, we have the nice, I know the viewers can't see this, but we have the nice 8-inch screen. We have, the dual climate control. It's not a premium sound system, but it is a regular cab. I don't know how premium you need to get in a regular
I also
cab.
love dual climate control in a
regular cab. Yep.
I don't know how different it could be.
Your wife and my girlfriend might say otherwise. They probably love it, right? The women are probably going to be bigger fans than the males, but this is a really nice option truck. Being that it's a regular cab, when I look at it from the outside in, the regular cab looks very angled. It looks very awkward. But when you get in it, for a regular cab, there's a decent amount of room. There's some room back here to store stuff. Yeah. But we're sitting here, and I'm comfortable. I'm not
pinned on the wheel or anything like that.
And you can still go back. You can go forward. Yeah. So it's definitely the approach or my assumption of how the truck interior-wise was going to be was much different once I got in it.
Right.
And you get into like the 4-doors of these trucks. They're huge cabs, man. They're big cabs. They're super spacious. But it just again solidifies where the popularity lies with these things, as you drive these trucks.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Chris, I'll tell you what, we're just about done with regen. We're down to 42%. Yeah. These trucks generally will dip down into the 30s, and that's when you know that your active regen is over. You may see it go lower from that. If you're out like towing or working it, that's probably more of results of a passive regen where the work you're doing is already just pushing for more soot out of there. So yeah, pretty good range, pretty quick time for a regen. Do you want me to pull over? Do you want to get behind the wheel on this thing?
Yeah, let's give it a go.
All right, man.
All right, so we made the switch.
That's it. Yeah, we made the switch. Chris, first thoughts, your first 5 seconds in this thing.
Super
what do you
responsive.
think?
Felt like a stock truck.
Yeah.
Not going to lie. This is, I'm going to complain. I don't like the camera in my face. It's been a minute since I've had that. So, other than that, this, I will say I'm used to a little bit of a lower truck. So I am very up in the air, too.
Yeah.
This is a tall truck.
It really is. Like I said, it's a small lift and a set of 35s on it, so it's not like it's jacked to the sky or anything. But when you're used to driving pretty much anything else, it definitely feels tall.
Just the position of how you're in the cab of this, you're up more.
Also, the way the hood slants makes the front end feel short.
Yep, and it's an illusion.
And it does. It definitely helps you feel like you're looking down at everything. The standard Ford owner kind of mentality.
I'd want to hook up to a trailer and tow with this.
Right?
Just to do it. Just to say I did it.
It's I think like in my head when I think about like what I want out of a regular cab diesel truck is you need something that's utilitarian. I mean, you're probably not getting it to be fancy, right? So you need it to do that daily driving that you have to do because you're a human who has to drive your vehicle every day. Yeah. But you also want it to be able to hook up to something and be able to pull it. And this is one of those trucks that just, it feels like it's not going to have a problem with that. And I'll tell you from experience, it doesn't.
No, this thing just gets up and gets out of its way.
Does.
Wow.
Yeah, and the turbo, I got to drive this before the turbo was on it. So I got to drive it with aftermarket tuning, stock turbo, and then aftermarket tuning, aftermarket turbo now. And I will tell you, no, I could not feel or measure or notice absolutely any difference in spool up.
No.
Or like even that hard acceleration like there where you just got on it a little bit, is it just runs.
It just goes.
Yeah.
What I like about with a slight turbo upgrade is you gain that response down low. You don't lose that is what I should have said. Yeah. But then you gain in that mid-range, that meat of the torque curve, right? You gain that, and then the truck just wants to keep running up top. It's not falling out of air, But I mean, this thing just rolling into the throttle here, but it downshifts, and I mean, it just, it threw you right back in the seat. It's there, it goes.
And
It's just
this is
crazy
one
how
of those
refined these
that
are.
I think when somebody drives a vehicle like this, all of a sudden that idea of emissions equipped performance just starts to become more and more feasible and more obtainable. Somebody hit me on the Duramax Tuner YouTube channel just this past week or whatever. Some with a comment in reference to like one of our should I delete my LML videos. Yeah. And the comment basically was saying, I don't know why all you diesel performance companies didn't get together and fight the EPA in court. And I was like, well, one, I know just from our camp, we'd rather spend our time innovating than litigating. So we'd rather be developing new products and working within the confines of what's been presented to us as opposed to spending our money on lawyers. Two, I'm not even going to address the fact that like huge mega corporations like, you know, GM and all the other auto manufacturers and gas and oil industries, they couldn't come up with enough money to win. So I don't know why smaller companies would try. But I think that also that comment comes from somebody who has a belief that the only way you're going to get the truck you want is to delete the emissions.
Well, we've talked about this before. It's the old mentality. It's old technology. Back in the late 2000s, early 2010s, that was the big movement, delete, delete, delete.
Yep.
And that's been a practice that a lot of shops and some companies have still maintained to this day. The emissions are a moving part. We've talked about this, right? There is a time and a place. There is going to be a failure rate. That's going to be there. That's inevitable. But there's also ways to approach how you modify the truck, how you tune the truck, how you maintain the truck that can really help those vehicles stay in one piece. I always make the comment and the joke, well, if your water pump fails, do you delete the water pump? My truck, 30,000 miles, the factory water pump failed.
Yeah.
Can't go and delete that.
Nope.
I had to go and buy a new one. Now, the parts to replace the water pump are a little less expensive than some of the emissions components.
Hey, listen, there's some of those emissions failures where when somebody says, I meet all of these requirements, like I'm never going to drive across the country.
Right.
My state is very unlikely to have any emissions equipment laws get passed anytime soon.
Yep.
There's little to no enforcement, and I've already had a massive failure that's outside of warranty that's going to cost me more money than it would to delete.
Yep.
I'm not against that concept. What I think I'm pro is saying let's take a look at the truck and find out the most efficient way to get the truck to run the way I want it to run. I want it to make more power. I want it to spool up quick. I want it to hit hard. Like you said, when it gets up top, I want it to feel like it has more air than what I need. I don't care what parts are included in that. If they switch to supercharging diesels, I'm not saying they will, but if somehow the technology all switched around and we went to supercharging diesels next year, I'd be cool with that if it drove great. Like, I wouldn't care.
I mean, at the end of the day, the guys, I want the sound. Okay, we all have that inner child in us, myself included. I'm not going to dispute that, right? Yeah. But there's a time and a place. But the idea here is you spend all this money on these trucks, you want the truck to perform. Yeah. That's it. You buy a heavy-duty truck for a reason. You want it to tow. You want it to get decent fuel economy. You want it to be reliable. You want to be able to get from point A to point B in the least laborsome possible way.
Sure.
Right? So when we talk about these types of things, to the gentleman's point, like you said, you want to innovate and you want to come with the times. A truck 10 years ago had much different technology than a truck of today's standards.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And the truck 10 years from now is going to have a lot different technology than what we are faced with today. As that technology improves, well, the technology of third-party companies like us improve.
That's right.
And we're able to have better understanding, better know-how. You remember driving a truck 7 years ago? Remember driving the old twin-turbo truck? And at the time, that was awesome, but that truck had, some questionable things.
Sure.
Where now you're talking getting in a truck and it's refined. It has that OEM style of no quirks, no blemishes, you hit the throttle, there's a dead spot, or, hey, if you're going to go into a regen, don't drive the truck too hard. You were driving the truck the same way you would drive the truck any other time.
Sure.
And it performed. You wouldn't have known the truck was doing that unless we were watching the gauge.
Exactly.
And I think that's one of the big pieces here is again, advancements in technology, that know-how and that understanding that companies such as us use. And that's where I think we're starting to see some of those companies start to come together and start to team up, where it's not the companies teaming up going after the EPA and the federal government. It's more of, hey, this is what it is, right? This is what's legal, this is what's illegal. Let's get the companies to get together and let's learn on, hey, will your part work with this part? Or, hey, let's try this tuning on this setup. We want to push the envelope and we want to get to that next step, but we want to do it within what's required by law.
Yeah. Well, and that's exactly why we love to have other people in the industry, whether it's enthusiasts or shop owners or manufacturing owners. We want other people in the industry to come on to Diesel Performance Podcast and be able to talk to our listeners about what is possible, what can we do about this, what is the next step. Because I think we're seeing, especially after the massive level of competition being raised at UCC this year, we're seeing that racing is certainly not dead. There is going to be a racing scene happening, and I think that as we get ready for other events like King of the Streets and other things that are going on in the industry, we're all thinking about what can we do, how can we make it better, how can we get, like you said, how can we get what we want out of the trucks. Chris, I know we're rolling into traffic here, guys, so I think we're going to get pretty close to wrapping it up here. What are your last thoughts on this truck? Is this better than driving your Cummins?
Oh, God, no.
You're such a liar.
I mean, the truck drives nice. And here's the thing, Fords definitely drive nicer than a Ram. I'm not going to dispute that. I've said this a million times. I'm definitely more in favor of my inline motor versus a V8.
Okay.
But this truck drives extremely well. The way the transmission transitions, the refinement of the truck as a whole, it's a super nice truck. I would definitely be able to be confident talking to guys in truck setup and telling guys, hey, if you're looking to buy a truck even, because we get those questions all the time. This is the truck to beat. I hate to say it. It really, really is. So, yes, I enjoy driving it. No, I would not give up my Cummins for one.
Well said. Listeners, thank you so much for joining us for the ride-along portion of this. Guys, if you're listening to the audio portion, stick around because we're going to have a little bit more Diesel Performance Podcast coming at you. We have our Super Tech Jeremy Garnett coming on, and I believe also we'll be talking to our remote support expert just a minute after a word from our sponsors.